Hi, good morning. Good morning, everybody. A warm welcome to all our viewers, and thank you for turning to the event Sustainable Investment in Citizen Energy Communities, Fostering Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Sources. I'm Alessandro Smundo. I'm Research and Policy Officer of the Italian Sustainable Investment Forum. We are a non-for-profit organization with the mission of promoting sustainable and responsible investments and the inclusion of sustainability criteria, so environmental, social, and governance criteria into financial products and processes. We hope this webinar will be the first of many events related to the Horizon 2020 funded project NEON, of which we are happy to be financial partners. The project has been set up to respond to the current state of play regarding citizen energy communities in Europe, energy efficiency in building, and renewable energy sources. This shows, in fact, a fragmented market in its early stage, at least to the analysis of the last few years. We point out that this event will be recorded. So if you do not agree, please feel free to switch off your camera and change your name. To stay up to date on the results of NEON project, of our project, please follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn, and as well as subscribing to our newsletter on the official website neonproject.eu if you want. But let's deep dive into our today event, briefly presenting our project, our NEON project. So moving to another slide, please. This will be the agenda of the event of today. We will host three presentations, three speeches from three panelists that I would like to thank again for accepting our invite. Working on three related projects now to NEON, but we will further focus about this during their presentations, and we will have then a Q&A session at the end of the event. So next slide, please. NEON project aims at developing and establishing a technical and business ecosystem for integrated energy services for European energy communities. These entities should be capable of saving energy, reducing CO2 emissions, and bringing together social and economic benefits while valorizing the energy efficiency and flexibility at the demand side. Our project will engage network stakeholders, service providers, and final consumers to establish by a co-creation process that has been carried on and will be carried on the cross-sector arrangements and the underlying service concepts for energy communities. Given the importance of energy savings and consumption reduction, the aim of the project is to deliver practical solutions to contribute to new business opportunities, competitive prices, high standards for services, and to the security of supply and sustainability for all the EU customers, both, of course, citizens and businesses involved in energy communities. The Directive 944 of 2019 on common rules for the internal market for electricity introduced the concept of citizen energy communities, probably you already know, as the category of cooperation of citizens and local actors that should be subject to recognition and protection under the European law, with the aim to enable faster market uptake and facilitate communities, both residential and non-residential, as I said, in becoming more energy efficient. In NEON, the citizen energy community service concepts and business models will be showcased in four pilot areas. Moving to the next slide, please. In four pilot areas that are Berchida in Sardinia in Italy, Domaine de la Source, Estaing City in France, and Polígono Industrial de Las Cabezas in Spain. These pilot areas will serve as early adopters in the project, whereby follow-up replication plans across 7 follower communities will be developed during the project. Next slide, please. The analysis carried out in the early stage of the project so far showed that Europe is committed to empowering consumers to foster energy transition, recognized indeed as a key element to reach the environmental and climate goals of the European Union. However, for sure, some adjustments are required to fully unlock energy efficiency and flexibility potential of consumers' communities. The building blocks of our project of NEON are widely present in the clean energy package, since they're enablers for a sustainable economy and a sustainable transition through the climate goals of the European Union. In the end, active consumers are under the spotlight as a crucial subject to drive this transition. The EU commitment is testified also by the huge amount of funding oriented to research projects related to the topics of energy savings, of energy communities, and renewable energy, in order to identify the most feasible and efficient way to reach climate and social goals together. For this reason, we decided to involve, as I mentioned earlier, some of these projects to sharing knowledge and treasuring their experience, drawing attention to suitable financial structures that are able to ensure cost effectiveness of the service offer, and minimizing business risk for all the involved actors. We tried to make this session as interactive as possible. So after our speakers' speeches, you will be able to ask our panelists questions using the chat window, the Q&A window of Zoom platform. You can find a small cloud for the Q&A in the bottom, at the bottom of the window. So we allocated roughly 15 to 20 minutes at the end of the slot to answer audience questions. So please take this opportunity to clear up also any lingering questions you may have. But to open today's session, I'm delighted to be joined by three speakers that who are themselves experienced practitioners in this field. So please welcome Vincenzo Bianco, full professor at the University of Genoa, sharing the experience of the RenOnBill project. Sotiris Papadelis, director of Hebes Intelligence, sharing the experience of the Sensei project. And Streng, business development officer of Joule Assets Europe, sharing the experience of the NTRAC project. So I would now like to invite Vincenzo Bianco to share his experience on RenOnBill. So Vincenzo, please, over to you.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. You should see my screen now. Can you confirm, Alessandro?
Yeah, correctly, thanks.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, everybody. My name is Vincenzo Bianco, and I'm full professor at the University of Genoa. Together with the University of Genoa, and other partners, among which Creara, who coordinated the RenOnBill project, we tried to analyze the application of OnBill schemes in the European context. And now I will provide you with a quick snapshot of the main issues and some possible solutions and business models we found during the RenOnBill project. So first of all, let's have a look to the common barriers that we have for the implementation of energy efficiency measures in the residential sector, since our target is mainly the refurbishment, the energy refurbishment of residential buildings. So if from an analysis of the literature, the four main barriers, the four main categories of barriers you can find are policy and regulatory issues, and the users issues, issues related to providers of energy services, and the financing of energy efficiency investment. The policy and the regulatory issues are mainly linked with somehow with the complexities of the supporting programs, because most of the programs are based on public funding in Europe. And this is a first weakness of the system, because public money is not enough to reach the energy efficiency target set by the European Commission. And this is clear for European Commission. In fact, they are looking for private measures in order to attract private financing in the energy efficiency market. Then the issues related to end users are usually linked to irrational behaviors or to the problem of split incentives that we will see later on, and also to a misperception of the so-called non-energy benefits, which are fundamental, especially after the pandemic world. Furthermore, energy service providers also have some issues, because now the competition is so high, since energy efficiency is something which usually is perceived as negative for energy efficiency providers, since you reduce the energy sales, which are the main source of income for most of energy companies. And so now the sector is under a deep change, and there is in progress the so-called servicization of energy efficiency. So the business is changing, and rather than based on the sales of energy products, the system is evolving towards the selling of energy services. So this change in progress, we'll see some winners and some losers in the business. And then there is the issue of the financing, since financial institutions usually perceive energy efficiency investment as a high-risk investment, since often the origination of the cash flow is not so clear. Secondly, investments are very fragmented, because the refurbishment even of a single building has a small size with respect to the usual investments that financial institutions are used to finance. And finally, there is an absence of aggregators, at least from the formal point of view. On the other hand, we will see that in the RenOnBill project, we identify some, let me say, national aggregators that are already available on the market. So, going more in details into the financing barriers, you know, from an analysis of the literature, you can find these 5 categories of the financial barriers. And I would like to stress the 4 and 5, because there is a problem in terms of risk assessment, because the perception of risk is fundamental. It's fundamental because for financial institutions, as I told before, energy efficiency is perceived as something with a very high risk. Why this? Because there is a lack of capacity. In what sense there is a lack of capacity? There is a lack of capacity on both sides, from the sides of financial institutions and from the sides of technical companies, because most of the time they are unable to understand each other, in the sense that for financial institutions it's very complicated to assess the risk connected to an energy efficiency project, because the energy efficiency is not, let me say, a concrete asset, but it is something, it's a saving on the energy bill that you should achieve as a consequence of some measures. And so there is the problem of collateral. Financial institutions cannot understand how they can protect from the risk of failure of the investment. And from the other side, there is a lack of capacity in showing where is the value, how to extract values from energy efficiency investment. This is, I mean, a lack from technical companies. And so this dichotomy, I would say, is a kind of hampering the investment of private capitals in energy efficiency. So this is what we detected from the analysis of the literature, and for us a possible solution can be the so-called RenOnBill schemes. RenOnBill schemes have run for more than 30 years on the North American market, mainly US and Canada, but there are also examples in developing countries for other reasons. But what is an RenOnBill schemes? RenOnBill schemes is very simple in concept, since the energy utility provides the upfront capital for implementing energy efficiency investment, and households owner or tenants, depending on the scheme, will pay back this capital on the bill. This is very important, especially in the North American market, because the RenOnBill scheme for a family is a cost, is not a debt, because you don't ask for a loan in the bank and increase your debt position with regard to the bank, for example, in case you want to buy a house or you need other financing, but it is simply a line on the utility bill. And this was quite successful in the US market. Now, what we did is to try to assess if this concept, if this scheme is replicable in the framework of European Union. And we found that three main categories of barriers, which are regulatory barriers, since the financial sector is one of the most regulated activity that we have in the European Union. And so there could be limitations from utility in the money lending activities, which is something specifically devoted to financial institutions. It's not the business of the utilities, but of financial institutions. Then we have customer-related barriers, since there is the divergent interest between owners and tenants, depending on the different agreements between owners and tenants. Finally, there are utilities-related barriers, since, as I told in the beginning, the business is changing and there will be winners and losers. And let me say that from the energy efficiency gains, there are especially two main categories of utilities, as we will see later on, that one will represent the winner and the other will represent the losers, at least in our understanding of this process. So what happens with the possible issues with the financial institution? So the energy utility provides upfront capital for the investment at certain conditions to their clients to implement these energy efficiency investment, and then the money is paid back on the bill. If the system is appropriately designed, or if there are the appropriate conditions, the payback of the capital will be compensated by the energy efficiency on the bill. So, for a certain number of years, the household owner or tenant will pay the same bills, since the investment is compensated by the saving of the bill. And this is known as the golden rule. Or in the most positive cases, you can also start saving. With the energy efficiency savings, you are not only able to pay back the capital, but also to achieve some saving. Clearly, this happens only in the most positive cases and for specific energy efficiency investments that you can do, because as you know that the possibilities we have when we talk about energy efficiency investments are multiple. We can do many things, simple things like lamps substitutions, or more complicated things like deep renovation. Let me say that from our analysis, RenOnBill schemes could work for investment up to 10,000–15,000 euro. If the investment is larger, then it's more complicated. But I can address you to some papers that we published on this, where you will find specific numbers. So this simple scheme can have regulatory issues, since depending also on the EU country we are considering, there could be limitation on the amount of money that energy utility can provide to final users, since money lending is an activity of financial institutions. Utilities cannot do it. On the other hand, let me also add that some utilities, especially the largest ones, have a banking license, so they can provide financial services. I can cite a case in Italy, which is the largest utility in Italy, which is Enel. Enel has a banking license, and with the Enel X, they launched some financial services. So if they want to make non-bill schemes, they are totally able to do it alone without the supporting of any financial institutions. But we can see that these schemes offer interesting possibility of cooperation between utilities, maybe the smaller ones, and financial institutions. Then, as for split incentives, we have 4 categories of split incentives. Energy-related split incentives, when the tenant is in charge of paying bills, and so the tenant is interested in saving energy, while the owner is not solicited in making energy efficiency investment, since for him there is no return. Opposite situation when the tenant is not in charge in saving bills, so he's not solicited in changing his behavior and saving energy, but the owner is interested. Then there are multi-tenant owner split incentives. This is a situation typical of multifamily buildings where there could be divergent interest, high level of conflict, and so it is difficult to take decisions which regard the whole building. And then there is the temporal split incentives, since when you are into a dwelling, you don't know, for example, how long you will occupy this dwelling, and so you don't know if it is convenient or not to implement energy efficiency measures, since you cannot foresee if you exploit them or not. On-bill schemes will help to act on some of these split incentives, mainly on temporal split incentives, since when you subscribe to an on-bill schemes, there could be the possibility to attach to the meter the scheme rather than to the person, and so the scheme can be transferred to the next customer. The transferability of the scheme is very relevant, especially in dynamic real estate market, where the renting market is very dynamic. So large European cities, for example, European capitals. And this is very interesting, because it removes very relevant barriers. Also on the tenant-owner dilemma could be approached, because in case of energy-related split incentives, the owner is not called to pay anything, since the payment will be on the bill. And if the golden rules apply, the tenant could be solicited to join on bill schemes. And in the United States, from the US experience, we can observe that this approach is working, with large programs delivered without too many concerns. What happens for energy utilities? Because for energy utilities, there are different kinds of barriers. There are corporate strategy barriers, since the implementation of energy efficiency services, whatever the modality, is seen as a threat to the core business of utilities, which are energy sales. Then the impact of energy efficiency program can be different depending on the nature of the utilities. And here we come back to the discussion of the winners and losers that in a moment I will show you in more details. And this calls to the necessity to look for new business models, to elaborate new business models, since the energy business is changing. So these are strategic issues, strategic barriers, if you want, that need to be overcome. And then there are operating barriers, since to implement an RenOnBill schemes, it is necessary to modify the RenOnBill process, and this is not necessarily simple. Also, because you need to implement specific accounting procedures, so it's something that could be complex in a larger organization. I'm not saying that this is unfeasible, but this is demanding. Then you need an accurate segmentation of the customer basis for RenOnBill schemes, because you need to avoid the risk of non-payment of the bills. In US market, the main threat for people to pay the bill is the right of disconnection, but the right of disconnection from the grid in Europe is something which is not seen so appropriate. Is seen something unfair for people, since energy is a basic good, so you cannot cut you cannot cut the supply of energy to people. It's not seen something extremely fair. So why you need an accurate segmentation? Segmentation is usually done on the analysis of the history of the billing payment. So if you have a loyal customer who have always paid the bills, you are reasonably confident that these persons will continue to pay the bills. And this is exactly what happened in the US, since from the US experience, the rate of non-payment, the rate of failure is very, very low. We are talking about less than 1% of customers failed in paying the bills. Furthermore, you need to manage a large network of suppliers and installers, because once you launch such kind of programs, you need to implement energy efficiency measures. So you need a network of trusted suppliers and installers, since often the success of energy efficiency measures is due to the correct implementations and correct installations. So which are the implications for the utilities? So here we will see who are the losers and we are the winners. There are power utilities which are definitely the winners of this game, in our opinion. Why? Because there is, in this moment, and now even more due to the geopolitical situation, the so-called electrification of consumption. There is a switching of energy consumption from whatever market to the power market, especially from gas market to power market. Since if you think to utilization of heat pumps for heating, utilization of induction kitchen for cooking, you are, the natural gas market is losing market share. Power utilities are gaining market share. And if on top of this you add also the electric mobility, you will see that right now power utilities in a really strong conditions. Imagine that as a power utilities, you promote energy efficiency services to save energy during the heating season. This is something that will affect in a very minor part your core business, but it allows you to launch a new business, which is the energy efficiency service business. On the other end, natural gas utilities can only have a defensive position, because obviously they can launch energy efficiency services, but it is unlikely that these services could offset the losses on the natural gas sales. So they will be, in our opinion, definitely the losers of this game. Then there are district heating utilities, which are a specific category of utilities that we considered in our project since we had district heating utilities. And district heating utilities, they have some opportunities to improve their operation, because if people save energy, for example, for heating, with their network, they can supply more buildings. So they save investments into the repowering of their power plants. So for them, there are some opportunities to, opportunities in terms of cost savings and optimization of the management of the district. Then there are the retailers. Retailers, in our opinion, are neutral because they don't care. They don't have asset in the terms of energy generation or energy extraction, like vertically integrated natural gas utilities or power utilities. They are traders. They buy on the market, they buy on the wholesale market, and then they resell to the households. So, to their point of view, they can consider energy efficiency as a service, and so they can stop selling natural gas and start selling energy efficiency service. They are flexible since they don't have a relevant capex exposure on the energy efficiency, on the energy market in general. Finally, there are the DSOs, the distributor system operators, that are a kind of special utilities because they provide services for the distribution network, but they can play a role in the on-bill schemes because they could be seen as facilitators. We elaborated the business models where DSOs have a role. In this moment, we have a scientific paper under review which explains in details these business models which involves the DSO. We had the discussions with the DSOs operators during our RenOnBill project, and so we had an idea that they could be involved in on-bill schemes. So, which are the possible business models? So, during the project, we defined the different business models to approach different markets and to satisfy different needs. Now, I want to present you the basic models, which is the so-called on-bill financing. On-bill financing is usually used as an umbrella term, but actually on-bill financing refers to a specific business models, which is the business models of on-bill financing. The business models of on-bill financing is the simplest one when a utility with the own financial sources support the schemes. So utility put its own money for launching the system. They select a panel of appliances. They propose to jump in an on-bill schemes, and so they provide themselves the upfront capital. Sometimes this capital can have partially a public, can be publicly sourced, can come from public funds in a share, but most of the capital is from the utility itself. So, with the help of service providers, usually private contractors, installers, ESCOs, and so on, they analyze the final user situation. They define which are the energy efficiency, most appropriate energy efficiency measures, and so they are implemented. After the implementation, the final user will pay the utility bill, where you have, let me say, to simplify the discussion, 2 lines of the bill. What you paid for the energy supply, plus another line which quantify the amount you need to pay back for energy renovation. And so the money then finally go to the utility. So this is the simplest form. Then we have the on-bill repayment model, where the utility itself cannot support the on-bill schemes, and they need the support of a financial institution. So the financial institutions provide the capital for the utility. Here we wrote escrow account. Why? I mean, I'm not a financial expert, but we had a financial expert in the consortium. And the escrow account can be a solution to guarantee the financial institution in case of bankruptcy of the utility. So this money from this financial institution could be sent to an escrow account of the utility, and this account is specifically dedicated to the on-bill repayment program that the utility wants to launch, so it cannot be claimed, for example, by creditors in case of bankruptcy. And so the financial institution is guaranteed that this money is used only for the on-bill schemes. So with these funds from financial institutions, they can finance the program, they get money, and they can repay the money to the one part of the money is used to repay the financial institutions. One part will compensate, let me say, will be the margin of the utility, and the system works in this way. This is called OBR, on-bill repayment system. This is also used in the United States. Now here we have a financial, I wrote in general financial institutions, but here we can have a single bank, single fund, a pool of banks that constitute a fund, for example, supporting these.
Vincenzo, sorry to interrupt. 2 minutes more, please, if you could.
Yeah, I'm done.
Thank you.
Then another interesting program that you can find in developing countries are on-bill schemes targeting energy poor customers. You can find examples like in Sri Lanka, Mexico, and so on. They are used for decreasing the peak demand, actually, because there is a shortage in supply. So to implement energy efficiency measures is a way for achieving the peak shaving, especially in the night. These countries are particular, and so they just incentive very small things like lamps or substitution of air conditioners, which are relevant in these countries with more updated devices, and so the peak demand in the night is reduced. These countries show a peak in the night, so it's something a little bit different with respect to Europe, and these schemes are working. So that's all for my side. This is the partnership of the RenOnBill project. We worked with the 3 utilities: Blue Energy from Italy, Feni Energy in Spain, and Calm Energy from Lithuania. Creara, which is an energy consulting company, was our coordinators. Plus, we had Adelphi from Germany and Delta Prime from Italy as our financial expert, and the Lithuanian Energy Institute as a consultant. You can visit the RenOnBill website for more information for the papers, where you can find detailed info about what I presented. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Vincenzo, for your very clear presentation and the lots of hints that you give us for the following discussion. Now we'll have Sotiris Papadelis will be representing Sensei, as I was saying. And so, Sotiris, what's your experience with innovative legal and financial schemes in your project? Please.
Okay, let me share my screen. You can see my screen, at least.
Yeah, can see it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So.
We can't hear you. Don't know why. No. But it was working, so.
Can you hear me now, maybe?
Okay, yes, great.
Okay, I was saying that Sensei is a very different project in its goals, etc., from RenOnBill, but you will see a spot similarities. And I will try, as I do my presentation, to highlight these similarities, because I found it quite interesting that two projects that start from very different starting points have similarities. One main similarity is that it seems that both projects start with an idea that says, let's take something that exists in the US and see how it can actually be implemented, if it can be implemented in Europe. So, something about, first of all, I'm Sotiris Papadelis. I represent HIBS Intelligence. It's a partner of the Sensei project. This outline doesn't matter. The Sensei project started in September 2019. It has a 6-month extension, so it will finish February 2023. This is the website. And what's the overall goal? The overall goal is, the stated goal at least, to propose services that allow energy efficiency to be treated as a transactable asset. Something that we can buy and sell and transact on it, so we can have more actors getting involved in this business model than just, let's say, UNESCO. And to this end, we adopted the idea of pay for performance as a way to bridge, let's say, these services. As a concept, pay for performance is quite simple. Okay, it says compensate an asset or a service according to its actual impact. So you measure what you get in terms of performance, and you compensate accordingly. So in the case of energy efficiency, it would be something like if you have an organization that has a mandate to support energy efficiency financially, you don't use dim savings. You don't use this idea that says, okay, I'll give you money, just bring the invoices for the work, so etc. But at least some part of this compensation comes ex post after the implementation, and as long as impact has been actually achieved. As I said, it's not new in the sense that, for instance, pay for performance as a concept already exists as something that governs the relationship between ESCOs and building owners. The whole idea of Sensei is you can take this concept and actually use it as something that will govern also the relationship between these organizations that support energy efficiency and the buildings. And usually you will see in the domain, the context of energy efficiency, the pay for performance concept to be described as feed-in tariffs for energy efficiency. It may or may not make sense. So let me start with energy performance contracting, just to have a starting point, that's all. So it is the most common performance-based approach to financing and implementing energy efficiency upgrades. And it's, if you want to visualize it, let's say, the important part to keep in mind that it's a bilateral thing. It's a model that governs the relationship between an ESCO and the client. And you may have a variation of it, where the client provides the investment capital, and then you have this variation of energy performance contracting with guarantees. But then you have the problem that, okay, this works when you have public buildings, for instance, because they already have the budget to do it, or large commercial clients, because they maybe have a maintenance fund, and they can use it for efficiency upgrades. But generally speaking, it's for all the other cases. I mean, it's not that easy to have this model because buildings are assets, they're already leveraged, so it's not that easy to add new liabilities just for retrofit. And then you have this other variation where the ESCO provides capital, and then you have the EPC with share savings. But then again, this makes sense for large ESCOs. If you see the majority of ESCOs in the market, they self-finance the projects because they don't have, or at least they have limited access to third-party finance. And so let's just say that one of the things that Sensei tried to do is to find out, he did it through engaging with financial sector stakeholders, what it would take for them to get involved in this bilateral business model of energy performance contracting. In reality, the actual question was not that. The actual question was if Sensei can actually help make energy performance contracts more attractive for third-party investors, but the findings are actually the same, no matter the question. And in many cases, the findings are straightforward. I mean, you should expect them. The question to always keep in mind is who would actually implement these aspects. For instance, we say aggregation of projects into portfolios. It makes sense. Okay, if you want third-party investors to come in, institutional investors to come in, you want large portfolios of projects, not single small ones. Okay, and then the question to always keep in mind is who's going to do it? Who's going to aggregate projects? Who's going to develop the infrastructure that is needed for screening the projects, for monitoring the performance, etc., and why? What is the market drive behind it? Then transparent and standardized project assessment procedures. So you need criteria and a process that actually can be used to decide whether to include buildings and projects in that portfolio or not. You will see the parenthesis automated. Standardized and automated is not the same thing, but in a way, standardized means remove subjective judgment. So if you can do that, then you're actually trying to find something that's automated in a way. Then how you deal with failure in fulfilling obligations. It was mentioned in Vincenzo's presentation about collateral. Most banks are used to invest where there is some form of recourse is embedded in the structure. When you think in terms of investing in energy efficiency, what is the recourse? What is the collateral? You may say, for instance, if you upgrade equipment, that equipment is collateral, but that's not really practical for many reasons. So this makes these types of investments regarded as high risky. Then stable cash flow streams. And for instance, if you wanted to invest in solar panels, that seems straightforward, but then energy efficiency has a lot of measures, a lot of cases, and etc. So that puts limitations on what types of things you can do in terms of buildings, in terms of measures, and of course, what do you need in terms of baseline calculation and measurement and verification for that. And finally, there must be one credit-worthy counterparty involved in the transaction structure. The ESCOs are not always that, the building owners are not always that, so you need something else. This is the main reason why in the US there is this preference for on-bill repayment schemes. Because in on-bill repayment schemes, the counterpart is the utility. And this is why the mantra for energy efficiency as a service in the US is always this put it on the bill thing. Now, if I had to give just one headline, it would be that what Sensei argues is that pay-for-performance schemes can actually help create the conditions for all these things that I just mentioned. But let's do it step by step. So the first argument of Sensei is that pay-for-performance increases the impact of public programs for energy efficiency finance by introducing visibility and accountability. And this is, I suppose, self-evident. It has nothing to do with energy performance contracting. This is a general observation. One thing to keep in mind is that the idea is never to have pay for performance to completely replace grants and subsidies. You need a part of them to cover the upfront investments, because otherwise you are missing the main driver for energy efficiency investment grades in general. But the idea that some part of it, some part of subsidies can actually be withheld, let's say, and then provided based on actual impact. And this, what tries to do is to impose, in a way, an upper bound on the acceptable amount of euros per megawatt hour saved. So it's a way to increase the cost effectiveness. Now, there is a valid critique to that, and that is the standard approach where you have dim savings and you say, I give you this amount of money and you just give me invoices for the works that actually have been carried out, is something that organizations and countries already know how to do. It's quite cheap. Introducing pay for performance needs new processes, even new technical capabilities, etc. So, do the benefits of pay for performance in terms of cost effectiveness of these programs outweigh the implementation costs? Now, Sensei cannot answer that question exactly because you need a pilot for that. But the idea is, okay, let's assume that the implementation costs are the same and find synergies. Find things that you can do, additional things that you can do with this tool, that's the pay for performance model. And one is related to the second argument that says that pay for performance can and should, and I will explain what I mean by should, be used in order to offer a premium to energy efficiency projects when the implementation leads to load state changes that are beneficial for the power grid's operation. So, performance can be used as something that links energy efficiency with the power system. And usually these two things are separated. I consider as something separated, if you think about it. I mean, the way they implement it. And Sensei has demonstrated, and by that I mean there is a deliverable that explains the methodology. There is a tool behind it that will be open sourced that shows that A, energy efficiency is valuable under specific conditions. And what I mean by that is energy efficiency can be used as a way to offset and drive out of the system large old and polluting power plants that are commissioned only for reserves. And these exist, and you pay for them to exist through capacity markets or other schemes. So strategic, let's say, load reduction through energy efficiency can actually drive out the need for these plants, for this capacity. And the other thing that is also demonstrated in the deliverable is that if you want to design a program that does that, you don't need a new tool set. You can do it with the same tools that power system operators already use in the context of the capacity adequacy assessment studies that they do. So you can just integrate it into these studies, this midterm capacity assessment. I said not only could, but should. Why? Because all the other alternatives, if you start thinking in terms from a perspective of power system operators, all the other alternatives are performance-based. Capacity reserves are performance-based, demand response is performance-based. So if you want to treat energy efficiency on equal basis, you have to reward it based on actual impacts, measured impacts, not just ex-ante calculations. The third argument is that if you have that, and by the way, it doesn't, this thing that I explained right now, that says give maybe a large part of grants in a traditional, let's say, way and keep another part to be linked on actual impact is a template. It can be used for other things too. Okay, and I give another example. There is this idea of smart readiness indicator, the SRI. And okay, the European Commission is very keen to see it implemented, and there is discussions about how to say updating these programs that support energy efficiency to also support SRI upgrades. Okay, that's fine. The thing is, SRI is a capability. So if I upgrade the envelope, this capability is always there, fine. But if I upgrade the smartness of the building, it's a capability that may or may not be used. If it's not used, why I paid it in the first place? So, okay, you can say that anything that upgrades smartness will be compensated as long as this smartness is actually being used. And then you have this link with a need to have a part of the grants actually related to actual impact. And okay, this is the concept of pay-for-performance programs. And the third argument of Sensei is that these programs can actually, even though their goal is not that, all the things that I mentioned, can also incentivize the development of the know-how and infrastructure that is necessary for energy retrofit project aggregation. Because this creates a market for aggregation, a need for an aggregator, for the energy efficiency project aggregator to exist. Otherwise, why wouldn't? And it also the reason or the incentive to create, to develop governance structures and technical capabilities to support this aggregation. And in terms of governance structures, Sensei introduces this concept of pay-for-performance program facilitator, which is a third party that's possible for execution, etc. There are 2 deliverables for that. They take different approaches. 6.3 approaches the concept of pay-for-performance program facilitator, trying to find similarities in the case of EPC facilitators, which we know that they actually have helped create energy performance contracting markets in Europe. And 6.5 takes the approach of finding similarities with demand response facilitators, in which case you're thinking of facilitators as parties that provide infrastructure, technical infrastructure, and a platform that aggregates data, monitors, etc. In terms of technical capabilities, you definitely need this idea, these processes of automated, as I mentioned before, project screening and evaluation methods. For that, okay, Sensei hasn't produced something, but then you have the measurement and verification of the impact, and for that, Sensei did first a review of what already exists, and for a lot of reasons, we decided to actually create, let's say, an open source, a tool just for that, for measurement and verification of impact. That's actually available to everyone, and it's continuously maintained, and a new version will come up sometime in September. Now, fourth argument, which is probably more relevant to this workshop, that pay-for-performance programs can help blend public and private funding. It was already mentioned by Vincenzo that public funding alone is not enough if you really want to have large-scale energy efficiency upgrades. So you need to find a way to blend public and private funding. And if you think about the conditions that was mentioned before, we said aggregation, we cover it. We said MMV and technical abilities, we cover it. We're missing 2 things. We're missing this idea of the collateral, the recourse, and I don't remember the other. But in any case, I argue that in a very simple way to describe pay-for-performance programs, you can actually find this the credit-worthy part. For instance, if you have this very, very simple, very naive, let's say, plot, it's quite easy to actually spot what is this trusted counterparty that's missing. And that's the public funding entity. You don't use the utility, as in the on-bill repayment, but you use the funding entity that withholds this amount of money to be actually provided based on actual impact. And then you said, okay, what I'm missing recourse. Okay, you have the pay-for-performance payments because they don't belong to the building owner and the ESCO only after the implementation of the project. And if you focus on the right side of the plot, it's like you have a risk-sharing agreement, explicit or implicit, between the public funding entity and the third-party investors that makes them both better off than if you have a public funding entity that just provided money ex ante and blindly, or a third-party investor that would expect to get their money back only from the building owner at the other end. Okay, because you have a lot of different business models about energy efficiency and different value exchanges, and money goes there and there and there, but you always have one source of revenue, and that is the avoided energy usage from the building. If anything goes south there, this actually creates problem for the whole complicated business model. And then I saw in Vincenzo's presentation this idea of an escrow account. Okay, you can think something similar in our case, but in this case it's a buffer between the escrow or building. You can treat them as a black box entity in our case, and the aggregator. And they both direct part of the payments to that account to be used as collateral to assume payment obligations that would be fulfilled. And the idea of an escrow account is to limit the risk of accounting performance deficit. So this idea that after a year we find out that a specific project actually underperformed, and now how the investment cost will be repaid back, for instance. And this is done by directing payments according to how the project seems to over and underperform. And it's quite straightforward to think about linking it with the measurement and verification information, so that to control, let's say, the minimum level that has to be kept, so that to actually control the risk. I won't say of default, I would say that the risk of underperformance. And I have one slide that actually tries to link what we've done in Sensei with energy communities, because, okay, Sensei was not a project for energy communities, but at the same time, it's not that hard to think that, okay, energy communities can be an aggregator. I mean, if you think about the way the aggregator was described, some entity that actually aggregates energy efficiency projects together, okay, an energy community can do that. An energy community can also be a capital provider in a sense, because you can crowdfund all or part of the necessary investment from the community members. And the moment you think of energy communities like that, then you can say anything that is discussed in Sensei, in terms of monitor, in terms of measurement and verification, or this idea of real-time allocation of payment obligations, which really control this escrow account, can help energy communities in treating energy efficiency as a collective asset, and not only, for instance, solar panels, which is already the standard thing to regard as collective asset in energy communities. And yeah. So, just 2 slides for conclusions. We know that the energy efficiency service sector is lagging behind the renewable energy generation in terms of demand for investments and business models for aggregation. You have a lot of ideas when you think about deploying solar panels, for instance, on buildings. The moment you think about, I don't know, upgrading boilers, this is not that easy to actually replicate. And there is a lot of work already done in aspects that have to do with measuring savings and covering risk and uncertainties. When you think in terms of individual project level, when you're thinking in terms of this bilateral relationship between an ESCO and a building owner, but the challenge is always how you upscale this, how you take this and make it work in the case of portfolio of projects, where you have a lot of projects and maybe a lot of energy performance contracts at the same time. And okay, the main argument of Sensei is that designing and rolling pay-for-performance pilots, because we're not there. Okay, You have pay for performance ideas already, as I said, in the US, California, Vermont. Now also they play with these concepts in Canada. We don't have pilots in Europe, but our argument is that designing and rolling out these pilots can lay the groundwork for development of all the things that you need to actually find out how to aggregate a large amount of energy efficiency projects, and how to use this aggregation to make it also attractive to private for finance. And that's all I have. And this is the site of the website of the project, so you can actually visit it if you're interested.
Thank you very much, Sotiris. And yeah, I think you'll have some pilots in Europe, since in Neon project we aim to integrate P4P schemes in innovative EPCs contracts. So let's keep in touch. Let's keep in touch about this. We will work on it, and it's part of our work package. So we'll be happy to share later. And finally we have Streng from Entrack. So over to you, if you want to tell us about your innovative platform.
Yes, hold on.
Please, thank you.
To find the right document to share. Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here and discussing the energy performance tracking platform for benchmarking savings and investments in building, otherwise known as NTRAC for short. So my name is Eddie Streng. I'm a business development officer at Jewel Assets. And in relation to NTRAC, I am mostly working on the engagement with financial institutions and also the business model development to ensure the longevity of the platform post-project duration. So a few key facts on the project. It's financed through an H2020 project under mainstreaming energy efficiency finance. It's lasting until October next year. We have 7 partners from 5 countries, for which 2 of these partners are responsible for pilots in Spain and Bulgaria, where we have approximately 4,000 buildings that we're piloting the platform with. The data gathering objectives is essentially to gather baseline and post project implementation data on 4,500 energy efficiency measures across those 4,000 buildings in Spain and Bulgaria, and essentially adoption of standard data description and exchange with the EFIG-D platform and other existing data platforms as well. And there's a funding of 1.3 or almost 4 million. So quickly, the objectives of NTRAC, essentially to enable massive gathering of data on actual performance of energy efficiency investments in building. So there's plenty of existing data out there. There's plenty of platforms, but it's very dispersed and it's not standardized. So the largest objective here is really to essentially create a common language in which we can centralize all of that data and effectively make it useful. And also to make this process continuous by engaging the stakeholders that actually possess this data. So there's a large effort there as well in capacity building, different activities with owners and operators, public authorities and ESCOs, and through various services that we're also developing in the business model development. We're looking at, okay, what services can we provide in order for them to actually provide us data? Because what we're finding with a lot of these stakeholders is that a lot of the time, the accessing this data or gathering it and making sense of it is actually quite a time-extensive effort. And many of these stakeholders don't see why that is useful or valuable to them. And then, as I mentioned, adopting a standard data description. So this will be aligned with the BEADS dictionary, and also creating the interoperability with other sustainable financing platforms such as DEEP and Dual Asset's own Equad platform, which is meant for processing projects for project financing. And this comes back to the whole creating the standardization, but the common language between platforms and also between stakeholders, and bringing the whole ecosystem closer. And then, as I mentioned, of course, the business models and agreements, there's a large effort in making this self-sustainable after the project, so that it's not just another platform that sits with the data, but is not very operational. So that's a key objective as well. So in a very simple infographic here, you can see that it's essentially about gathering from these different sources. You have enterprise databases, utility data, energy bills and certificates and audits, cadastre, weather data, and other external platforms such as Dual Asset's own platform, creating a common data model for all of these data sources, and then providing the services of this data through the NTRAC web application. As you can imagine, gathering all of these data sources and creating that common language for all of them is quite an extensive effort. So our approach to this is essentially accessing this data in the existing databases and platforms and aligning them internally. So the common open data model I just showed you, and then enabling maximally the automated data collection. So one way of doing this is, of course, through establishing APIs with existing databases and platforms. Some of these databases and platforms are easier than others because they already have existing APIs that you can simply agree with and connect to the platform that we are developing. But in other cases, you have to basically start from scratch. And combining this then with user submitted data. So this is something that we've created basically the template for how these users should be gathering this data and how to input in the platform. But what remains to be seen is, how do you incentivize these users to do so? We're exploring various, pay as you use the platform. So essentially, the more you upload data yourself, the more access you have to other data within the platform. So therefore incentivizing them to upload their own data. And then, of course, the consistency checks of the platform. So part of the reason that we're also doing this is, of course, that even if the data exists out there, we have also noticed that it's very difficult to know what the reliability of the data is. So we have automated data checks that basically verifies the data. And for example, for financial institutions, if they're looking at a certain building typology, they can see where this data come from, how reliable it is, and we're then grading them according to our scheme there to portray that. And so quick look on the data process here. So you can see the inputs are coming from public data, third-party companies such as ESCOs, stored internally at building owners, or manual entry, if it might just be some person's knowledge, might be in paper format, for example. This then goes into the NTRAC platform for the pre-processing, so mapping the data and between the two distinct data models and the BEADS dictionary there. Then verifying the data in a process which different types of data are checked for accuracy and inconsistencies, and then cleansing this data. So if there are inconsistencies or problems with accuracy or inaccurate records, that's basically just remove them. And then data storage and analysis, so processing this for KPI extraction and benchmarking. And then in the outputs, the actual, the visualization app or the platform itself. We are providing then benchmarking, evaluation of energy efficiency measures, suggestions as well of based on your building type and building age, etc. We can suggest that based off of the other data within our platform, what would be useful for you to implement within your own building. And then a risk evaluation of the energy efficiency measures as well. And this would be the most useful here for financial institutions, I guess, in terms of just looking at, entering new types of investments and trying to invest more in energy efficiency measures, having that reliable data set where you can look at, okay, what's the actual risk behind this energy efficiency measures? And also with building types, how do they differ, etc. And so essentially we have 3 different user types here. So we have building owners and operators, financial institutions, and policymakers or public bodies. So for building owners and operators, a single place to collect all building related data, clean up your own data processes, and have that essentially one-stop shop solution for all your data needs. MMV of projects, benchmarking as well. How are my buildings comparing to other similar buildings in the similar areas with similar energy efficiency measures? What could potentially be improved? So that goes to the decision support tools and the recommendations. For financial institutions, then benchmarking and risk assessment. So comparing the financial performance of energy efficiency projects in buildings, evaluate investments projects considering specific building characteristics. And one big thing, of course, on financial institutions' minds nowadays is assessing the CO2 emissions reductions related to investments. And this we've seen through our financial institution engagement, that this is almost always mentioned as the key criteria right now for them. And then for policymakers, tracking as well the performance of the building stock within their regions, achievement of environmental targets, and especially if there are grants being handed out to achieving these targets, you can effectively then see, using this platform, okay, how well have these grants actually performed? How can we restructure them and improve in order to reach our targets in the future? And so speaking of relevant for public authorities, I think providing a single place for storing and monitoring the performance of the public building stock and supporting that reporting and decision making and policies related to their climate action commitments is probably a key selling point for the platform right now. And then for municipalities and cities as well, if they want to promote voluntary or potentially mandatory schemes for reporting of their building energy performance related data for all buildings, NTRAC would be able to provide that technical infrastructure to support the practical implementation of these policies. And I just say now in the end of this, if we're focusing a bit on the investment indicators that we will be providing, then so essentially there are 6 key investment indicators there. So we're looking at energy use intensity. So how much energy is your building using, and is it comparatively wasteful compared to other buildings? Energy use saving intensity, how much energy could possibly be saved across your building, and how significant are these energy savings? Avoidance cost, how much will it cost to avoid wasting this energy? And then the good old classics, simple payback, net present value, and internal rate of return. And I think in terms of what I've been hearing from the previous presentations and what a lot of my work revolves around as well is creating that common language, because as I think Vincenzo mentioned, the two different stakeholders here, two different sides, speak completely different languages. Most of the time they need someone or something to be in the middle there to essentially translate and make the projects move forward more seamlessly. And a lot to do with standardization. So it's not just a question of data standardization, but standardization in terms of due diligence processes. When it comes to risk assessments, we're producing risk assessment protocols. We have ESG evaluations, etc. I think that is the key issue for us now, especially when it comes to small and medium-sized projects. It's a key need to just standardize the processes, create tools in order to do this, in order to support all stakeholders, in order to effectively complete these projects that are otherwise just standing still. But there's capital out there, there's plenty of projects out there. So this is key for us now as well. And we're also setting up an industry association right now called the Sustainable Energy Finance Association, where NTRAC will be involved in the future as well. So happy to discuss that further. But yeah, good data breeds good investment decisions, and that's what we're trying to do. So quick overview of the project for me, but happy to discuss further.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And this wraps up the panel discussion for today. And yeah, our speakers are now ready to take any questions from the audience. We are a little bit late, so we'll use the next 5 minutes to Q&A. We just received a question for Eddie, asking if the NTRAC program going to take place in new or other countries in Europe, in addition to those 6 ones from now on. What's the future of the platform?
Sorry, forgot the mute button. So since it's an age 2020 project, currently the active countries are where we have partners and where we have the pilot buildings, but it's EU wide, so it will be available within all of the European Union.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I'm a little bit curious about this, but we will talk separately probably. Okay, thank you. Just checking for other questions. Probably I had one for Sotiris about the amount of repayment with P4P schemes. I mean, I used to think that this kind of flexibility may be probably too little on a large scale, if not considering maybe an aggregate contest such as, for example, energy communities. So we were thinking about trying to gather all the incentives at a community level. What about your experience analyzing this kind of flexibility? Is it enough to incentive the good behavior of consumers?
Okay, we haven't worked with consumers actually in Sensei. What I can tell you is that we have done some preliminary analysis in what we would expect in terms of a minimum and a maximum that exists in deliverable, I think 6.4. But in general, the idea is, okay, if an energy efficiency project is economical and makes sense financially, it will happen anyway. Okay. Now, if a project is not, because of the building, because of the measures selected, whatever, doesn't make sense, it won't happen and shouldn't happen. So the whole idea is to structure a pay-for-performance program so that you tip the scale, and projects that, okay, may not be very attractive right now, but maybe if you give a little push, will actually become attractive. So this is where you want to be. you don't really need to provide quite large incentives, because that would incentivize not that, how to say, viable projects. And at the same time, pay for performance has this presumption, but I think it's quite accurate, that at the end, if you actually make a calculation, at the end, you should hand out less money, but get better results, if you think about it. And this is the main attraction and the main idea, because the moment you have accountability and visibility, a lot of things may not happen, because a lot of projects may depend, let's say, on not being that accountable. But at the same time, the ones that would do would actually give you much more impact if you compare them with providing money blindly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you. Thank you very much. And there's Vincenzo with his hand raised.
Yes, I just want to add something to what Sotiris said, which is extremely correct. Because when we evaluate an energy efficiency project, in my opinion, there is not only the financial side, but there is two more aspects to consider, which is the aspect of non-energy benefits. Because when you refurbish your flat or building, you don't only have a gain in terms of saving on the bill, but also saving gain in terms of well-being inside your flat, inside your house, inside the building. And this is a value that is recognized by the market, because if you look at some analysis, I mean, the numbers are arriving now because there is not a history, but there is a literature growing on the analysis of how much the real estate market appreciates houses which are energy efficient. And the appreciation in some cases is higher than the values of the work you did. In some cases lower, it depends on the country. But anyway, there is a value attributed to the non-energy benefits. First thing. Second thing is how much is the value of the saving in externalities consequent to energy efficiency investments. Third, very actual in this period, how much is the contribution of energy efficiency to the energy security, which is the value. If you look at I mean, even before the war between Russia and Ukraine, in the energy security strategy of European Union, energy efficiency was mentioned as a priority, because I mean, this is the strategy that was developed by the first time by the International Energy Agency in the beginning of the 70s, during the first energy crisis. How should we solve the problem of an energy crisis? By consuming less energy. You know, the answer is quite obvious. Then the modalities, the implementation is quite complicated. But I think that especially in this context, these three elements, in this context, because we have geopolitical instability, we had the pandemic crisis, so the issue of the well-being and the value of the energy security, the contribution to the energy security of energy efficiency, plus the saving in externalities, if we want to think about climate change, are three elements that now must be considered, included into the evaluation from different actors, from different perspectives, because clearly from the point of view of the financial institutions, they don't get any benefit from the saving in externalities or from the increase in the energy benefits. So each player has to analyze which are its own benefits, because the benefits can be different according to the player which is considering the investment.
Even if addressing externalities for institutional for financial institutions, probably addressing externalities may have a resilience gain in their investment. So maybe in the future also this kind of aspects will be considered, I think, and probably already considering some of our insights on the financial institutions and financial investment.
from the point of view of a sustainability strategy of a financial institutions, then to promote investment that have a saving in externalities, obviously it can be an asset. It depends, but anyway.
I have a question for you that is quite linked to this somehow. Vincenzo, did you think how to address households in energy poverty conditions? Could on-bill schemes be a solution somehow? And I think that probably is for the three of you, but mainly for Vincenzo.
It can be for simple devices, for simple things. I mean, if you have all the refrigerators, which is highly consuming, with the on-bill schemes, you can help people in poverty to substitute these devices, or simply with the lamps. There is the example of the Sri Lanka. It is mapped in our documents if you go on the website, because we made a map of different on-bill schemes. And it is a very powerful example, because in Sri Lanka they have a night peak in power demand. And people is poor, they cannot afford to buy LED lamps instead of traditional incandescent lamps. And they launched these on-bill schemes for lamps substitutions. And people in a couple of months can pay back the investment for the lamps. And after they save on the bill, because LED lamps are consume much less energy from one side. And from the other side, the power company is satisfied because they manage to reduce a little bit the peak demand. Then another successful scheme is in Tunisia. In Tunisia, they launch a kind of on-bill programs to support the installation of solar thermal power panels to save natural gas. You see, the scope of these programs is more in terms of energy policy rather than for supporting, I mean, for making business. So they want to reduce the consumption of natural gas for heating. They have a lot of sun, obviously, in Tunisia. So the national company promoted with on-bill schemes the installation of solar thermal power plant. So these are small investments that in 1-2 years people can pay back on the bill, so they don't need to have any upfront capital. But in the following years they save a lot of money, but also the state save a lot of money, because the Tunisian state will reduce the import of natural gas. So this is more or less the object of other on-bill schemes to fight energy poverty, or to improve the energy condition of poor or developing countries. These are existing programs. It's not theory. It's not theoretical.
I see Sotiris with his hand raised. So please, I've just maybe a quick answer, then we'll wrap up the event.
Since you asked everyone about the energy poverty, we had this discussion in Sensei about pay for performance and energy poverty. There is an issue, because how you define performance. In cases of energy poverty, let's say you have to subsidize upgrades in the respective building. Okay, you wouldn't expect much savings, because in reality you would expect some kind of rebound, because people who are in poverty actually use less energy than they should, so they should have the opportunity to use now more. So defining performance, for instance, in terms of savings, actually makes very easy for a performance, for pay for performance model to work in terms of energy poverty. But at the same time, you can be flexible in how you design, how you define performance. For instance, I know that in the UK there is a discussion about pay for performance, where they actually want to include in the performance aspect indoor conditions. And that is related to an experience they had, that in many cases improving the insulation, the energy performance of the building led into a deterioration in terms of humidity and etc. in the buildings. So they say, okay, now if we want to subsidize and provide money for energy efficiency improvements, this aspect must be monitored and be included in what you define performance, and actually get paid according to that aspect too. So you can be flexible in what you define performance, but you always have to keep in mind that energy poverty is a tricky aspect. So I don't know what the performance would be in the case of energy poverty, really. But that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I don't know, Eddie, if you want to add something, otherwise we could.
No, I won't drag out the time anymore. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you, to all of our speakers, and to our audience for joining us today, hoping that we gave you some food for thoughts. Again, feel free to contact us for any follow-up, and remember to follow our project both on Twitter or LinkedIn, as well as on our website, again, neonproject.eu. And that's all on my side. Thank you very much. You'll find the rec of this event on the event page on our website. There is finanzasostenibile.it with some of the materials that the speakers would like to share with you. Thank you again, and see you next time. Bye. Have a nice day. Enjoy.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.